please hit that subscribe button. Hey everybody, better suited to win the Stanley Cup this season. If you are new to the channel, Washington Capitals, the Boston Bruins.
Locked on and he scored! And we're live. Hey everybody. So I am pretty excited for this video here. I think this is going to be a fun one. The other day we looked at Sportsline's Stanley Cup probabilities for the 2020 NHL playoffs, and they gave a percentage value, what the chances are for each of the 24 teams remaining to win the Stanley Cup this year. And there were some of them I certainly agreed with, others I definitely did not, and I've decided why don't I kind of do my own Stanley Cup probabilities and talk about which teams I think I have the best chance, which teams I think really don't have much of a chance. And I'm not a huge numbers guy. I'm not a great mathematician or anything like that. So instead of assigning all of them a percentage value, which I don't even know, honestly, how you would come up with those, I've done it a little bit differently where I am putting every team in a tier. So basically, there's going to be, 4 tiers all the way from teams that really I don't think have much of a shot at all down at the bottom, to the strongest contenders in the league up at the top, and every team will go somewhere between those, and that's pretty much going to be this whole video, so we might as well get into it here. Please like and subscribe if you are new. Both of those things really help the channel a lot and are very, very much appreciated. But let's get into it here, starting with the lowest tier teams, which I have called virtually no shot. Now, I don't want to say that any of these teams that are still playing have absolutely no shot, because that's not the case. If you're one of those 24 teams that will be playing when hockey returns, you at least have a 0.01% chance. I mean, nothing's impossible. So I didn't want to say that they have no shot, but these are teams that virtually have no shot in my opinion, and they are Montreal, Florida, Chicago, Minnesota, and Arizona. Montreal, they were a 500 team this year. A lot of people don't even think that they belong in the still playing, but they're there as a 12 seed going and playing the play-in round. I don't see them getting beyond the play-in rounds or even into the playoffs, never mind winning the cup. Montreal is not a Stanley Cup level team, not even close. Florida, Florida is not a Stanley Cup team. You think about what wins in the playoffs, defense and goaltending. That's Florida's biggest problems. They have no defense, and Sergei Bobrovsky was awful this year for them. They're a high-flying offensive team that can score a lot, but they cannot keep the puck out of their own net. Absolutely not a cup team. The Chicago Blackhawks, another 12 seed, this time from the West. Another team that was a very mediocre 500 hockey team this year. Yes, they still have Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, but that you need more than that to win the Stanley Cup. Corey Crawford is not the same goaltender as he was before all of these head injuries and issues. Duncan Keith is well past his prime. This team is still not anywhere near cup level. Minnesota, a very mediocre team in my mind. Minnesota is one of those teams that I don't think was going to make the playoffs if things had continued normally. They're very, they've got some good players, but they've also got a lot of guys that don't do a whole lot on that roster, especially offensively. They're very offensively challenged. Devin Dubnyk had a horrible year this year in goal. Alex Stalock actually kind of ended up being the starter. So you got goaltending issues. You've got no offense. A lot of passengers on that team that really don't bring a whole lot to the table. Minnesota's very mediocre. And Arizona, they haven't made the playoffs since 2012. They're a young team coming out of a rebuild, or really kind of still somewhat in a rebuild. Still haven't made the playoffs yet. We're not going to make the playoffs if things continue normally. Now, they're very, very good defensively, and Darcy Kemper is one of the best goaltenders in the league. So kind of the opposite of Florida there, where they do have the defense and goaltending to win in the playoffs, which is why I think they have a slightly better chance than the Florida Panthers. But, this isn't a cup team, very offensively challenged, very young and inexperienced as far as the playoffs go. They're not winning the Stanley Cup. Next tier is what I call slim chance. So these are teams that have a slightly better chance than the last ones that I've talked about. They're a little better than virtually no shot, but they still have a very, very slim chance of actually winning the Stanley Cup. And to start off this group, I have the New York Islanders. Islanders this year, I think, are not as good as they were last year. They downgraded at goaltender when they let go of Robin Lehner and brought in Varlamov. They were really slumping, post-trade deadline, especially before the season got put on pause. Now, that doesn't really matter because it's been such a gap in time that no momentum, good or bad, is going to carry over from where teams were in March to now, or when this starts up again in August. None of that momentum is going to carry over in either direction. It's a complete reset, but this Islanders team, I just don't think is a cup-level team. They could maybe win a round, yes. Go to the Stanley Cup, I don't see it. Next, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets. Columbus is a team that, very, very offensively challenged. Lost Panarin, lost Duchesne, lost Dzingel. Merzlikins and Korpisalo have been fantastic in goal for them this year. They're very tight defensively. They've got a lot of character on that team, a lot of heart. Can they win a round? Possibly, absolutely. Could they, are they going to make a deep run? I don't think so. I don't think this year's Blue Jackets team is as good as last year's Blue Jackets team. They certainly don't have the same level of star power. I don't see it. And next to the Vancouver Canucks. Vancouver, it's inexperience. You don't go in coming out of a rebuild and win the Stanley Cup in your first year back in the playoffs. And for, a major roles on this team are filled by guys like Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson and Brock Besser, who have never played an NHL playoff game in their careers before. This is going to be, if they do make the playoffs and into the actual playoffs beyond the play-in round, this is going to be their first taste at playoff hockey, and you just don't go in and win that quickly. And this is a team that I don't think Vancouver hasn't made the playoffs since 2015, I believe. So it's been a while, and it's just inexperience. You have to lose in the playoffs at least a couple of times before you go on and win. And Vancouver had just their first year back in, probably not a cup team. Along similar lines, I have the New York Rangers, who are next. The Rangers are a team in a very similar situation. Very talented, very good, coming out of a rebuild, had a much even better than expected year this year. Panarin and Zibanejad were unreal. It's inexperience. They're not going to win the Stanley Cup their first year back in the playoffs if they even get beyond the play-in round. Carolina's a tough matchup. This Rangers team is not going to go all the way this year. Very, very bright future. Same thing with the Canucks. Very, very bright future, but they're not ready yet. They're too young. They're too inexperienced. And again, you have to go through the playoff losses before you go all the way. And we've seen that with St. Louis. We've seen that with Washington losing to Pittsburgh how many times before they finally put it all together in 2018. We've seen it with Pittsburgh. You look at some of the tough playoff losses they had in the early part of the 2010s to then end up being a cup level team with that same core in 2016 and again in 2017. You got to lose before you win in the postseason, and it's the same thing with the Rangers there. And then the last team I have in slim chance is the Calgary Flames. Just too many holes on that team. I don't think David Rittich is one of those elite Stanley Cup level goaltenders. He's good. There's no doubt he's a good goalie. Is he an elite goalie? I don't think so. Holes, depth issues, particularly with that team. I think they're very, very reliant on that top line for a lot of their offense, and then obviously Matthew Tkachuk as well. But they're a good team. I don't think they're a Stanley Cup level team. I really don't see them going all the way, to say the least. The next tier here is magical run. So these are teams that do have a chance to win the Stanley Cup this year, but they would need to go on some sort of magical run, similar to like what Vegas did in 2017, where it was just, there was some magic in the air and things seem to go right. They get really hot at the right time, or they get spectacular goaltending to steal a couple series. They need a lot of things to go their way for them to be a Stanley Cup team this year. But it is possible. And the first one in that group for me is the Nashville Predators. Very talented team, very good roster on paper, very, very disappointing season this year. Really underachieved this year. Now, we've had this massive time off. It's kind of a fresh start and a full hit of the reset button here. Maybe they come back playing at the level that they were supposed to be playing at this season and pull off some ridiculous run and go to the Stanley Cup final or win the Stanley Cup. Similar to that, we have the Winnipeg Jets. Now, Winnipeg is a team that, their big issue is defense, but then you have Connor Hellebuck, who's an all-world goalie in goal, so that, incredibly talented up front, with so much scoring with, Wheeler, Scheifele, Connor, Ehlers, Laine, a lot of talent, a lot of scoring up front. It's just the defense is the huge question in Winnipeg with, Josh Morrissey being their number one guy, and then beyond that, kind of a lot of depth defensemen there. They don't have that, serious top four. So, I think it would take a magical run, largely on the back of Connor Hellebuck, for Winnipeg to pull it off. Toronto Maple Leafs, defense. This is a team that I don't see going anywhere near the Stanley Cup this year. They're not good enough defensively. We know how much talent they have. We know they can score. They've got insane offense. But again, what wins in the playoffs? Defense and goaltending, and that is not Toronto's strong suit. So again, I'm not giving them no chance or a slim chance. They do have a chance, but it would take a magical run and some serious stepping up by some of these defensemen on Toronto's roster for them to ever get to the Stanley Cup final or win a Stanley Cup. I just don't see it. The Dallas Stars, they're in the magical run category. Very, very good defense and goaltending in Dallas, which is why, a lot of people, I think, have them. I've seen a good number of people talking about Dallas as kind of one of those teams that could potentially make a sneaky run here because, they're so good on defense. They're so good in goal. They don't give up goals. For me, the offensive issues with Dallas are just too much. So this team, does not score. They need to win games 1-0 or 2-1. If they give up more than 2 goals, it's over. They're done. They're not winning. So I think there are too many offensive issues with Dallas. I don't think they're a cup team. I think they could win a round or two, absolutely, but I don't see them being a cup team. The Edmonton Oilers, again, I think it would take a big time run for them. I don't know how I feel about Mike Smith being this, Mike Smith's a very good goaltender, and he had a very good year for them this year in Edmonton. But is he a Stanley Cup level goaltender? I don't know at this point if he's a Cup level goalie. They've got a lot of youth on that defense that have had to play important roles. And in depth, obviously up front you've got Draisaitl and McDavid leading the way offensively, but their secondary scoring has been an issue at times. It's possible for the Oilers this year, but I think it would take a magical run. And the final team in the magical run category for me is the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, they almost had one of those magical runs last year where they went all the way to the Eastern Conference Final before losing to Boston. I don't think they get that deep again this year. But listen, they're a good team. They're a very good team. They're a talented team. They've got a lot of young, hungry, exciting players on that team. They're very, very good. Their defense is unreal. That D-core is just, you look at that D-core roster on paper, it's just sick. I don't know, does Mrazek play at that level again this year that he did last year? I don't know if I trust Peter Mrazek to do that. And I think, there's just a little bit missing in Carolina that's keeping them from being one of those top tier teams. I think they're just one step below that, and that would, would take a big time run for them to pull it off. And then finally, the last category I have are the strong contenders, and I almost made a fifth one of favorites, but then I realized that I really can't separate most of these strong contenders from the favorites. It's so wide open this year, and there's so much unknown given the long layoff and what these teams are going to look like coming back. I decided to keep all of these teams in one group because I really think they all have very legitimate shots at winning the Stanley Cup. And the lowest first team I have in the strong contenders that I almost put in the magical run, but I decided to keep them up with the top teams, are the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think a lot of people are overlooking Pittsburgh. Last time I checked, they still have Sidney Crosby, they still have Evgeny Malkin, they still have Chris Letang. They're getting Jake Gensel back. They added Jason Zucker at the deadline. They added depth scoring with Patrick Marleau and Connor Sherry at the deadline. They've had a lot of young defensemen step up and play really well. Matt Murray was playing a lot better, after the All-Star break than he ever did before during this season. I think things were not going great for Pittsburgh, right? That few weeks leading up before the pause in the season. But that bad momentum is gone now. That's not going to carry over. It's been way too long of a layoff. So Pittsburgh's kind of getting a reset button here, and they're a very talented team. So I think Pittsburgh has a legit shot. They're a team that a lot of people overlook, and when you start overlooking the Pittsburgh Penguins is right when they go off and go on another deep run. That's just classic Penguins. So I'd be careful if I had to play Pittsburgh in these playoffs. Next, I have the St. Louis Blues. I have them fairly low among the contenders just because teams don't repeat. I mean, obviously, Pittsburgh did it in 16 and 17, but other than that, how many teams have recently repeated? Back-to-back, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So, I think St. Louis is a very good team. They're obviously one of the top teams in the league, but I don't see them repeating. Next, I have the Philadelphia Flyers. Philly had a very, very good season this year. A huge bounce back year after last year. But this is Carter Hart's first taste of playoff action. I don't know. We've seen it where obviously Binnington's done it. Matt Murray did it where they just come in and in their first NHL playoffs go all the way. It's definitely possible. Are we going to see it again? It seems like, with Murray doing it kind of in back-to-back years and then Binnington doing it last year, I feel like we almost are going to get a break from that, and it's going to maybe be a veteran goaltender that wins it this year, possibly. I don't know. Carter Hart in his first playoffs, that's a question mark. Is he going to rise to the occasion, or is it going to be too much for him and he needs that experience before he is ready to make a deep run? And then, Philly, a lot of, they were kind of the third place team for most of this year. And it was really that big hot run after the All-Star break that got Philadelphia into that premier level of top team. And, that hot streak, that's gone now. The momentum is gone now because it's been such a long layoff. So, Philly's going to be an interesting team to watch when we do come back because, are they going to be that elite level team or are they going to be that one step down where they were for kind of like the first half of this season before they got really, really hot and put it all together. Next, I have the Boston Bruins. They've got the President's Trophy curse going against them. And again, I've said this many, many times. I don't think Boston wins the Cup this year. They were the best team in the regular season. Obviously, they have to be in the strong contender category, but I don't think Boston wins the Cup this year. And now we are into, Boston was number 5, so we're into the top 5 here. But we've got the Vegas Golden Knights, and this is a team that I am going to talk about in depth in a video that I am recording right after this, and that is going to drop on Monday. So tomorrow from when this video is going to come out. But yeah, Vegas is a team to watch, guys. Very, very talented, underrated top 6, like one of the best top 6 forward groups in the league, and no one really talks about it. I think Alec Martinez was a huge addition to that D-core to help round out that top 4 and give them a veteran guy who's done it before and been a Stanley Cup winner. And then the goaltending duo, Leonard and Fleury, it doesn't get any better than that. So Vegas, I think, is a team to watch for sure. Number 3, I've got the Washington Capitals. They are built for playoff hockey. They very disappointing first-round loss last year. They're going to be hungry. They're going to be back with a vengeance. They won the Cup in 2018 with a very, not exactly the same team, but a very similar group. A lot of players still on the team from that year. So, their top 6 forward group is very, very good, similar to Vegas and some other teams. You have Ovechkin and Oshie and Wilson and Backstrom and Kuznetsov, and Verana had a great year. And then you got that D led by John Carlson, who should win the Norris Trophy this year. It's just Washington's a loaded team, and they're a very strong contender for the Stanley Cup. At number 2, I have the Colorado Avalanche. Very hot, trendy pick this year. They're a team that seems to be ready on the cusp, ready to break out and maybe go all the way. And, you know, I've said earlier, talking about some of the other young teams, the teams like Vancouver and the Rangers, who I don't think are ready yet. They need that experience. Colorado has had that experience of losing and you know, chipping away and going a little bit deeper each year. And now maybe it's time for them to actually make the full run and go all the way. You know, the 2018, they lost in the first round to Nashville. Last year, they made it to the second round. They knocked out a 1 seed in Calgary, and then they lost to San Jose. Now maybe after those 2 losses and all that experience and learning from that, now maybe it's time that they put it all together and make that full run. And Colorado, very, very good team, extremely scary. One question mark I have with them certainly is the goaltender position. Do they have Stanley Cup level goaltending? That remains to be seen, but they're a team with a real shot this year. And then finally, that leaves my number 1 team, my Stanley Cup favorite, my strongest contender this year to me is the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, we know their roster on paper is just absolutely loaded, probably the best roster in all of hockey. They've got Andrei Vasilevsky in goal, who's an elite goaltender, probably my pick for best in the league, best pure, you know, talented goaltender in the league. Very strong defensively, tons of offensive firepower. It's the freaking Tampa Bay Lightning. The one thing with them is mental. It's all mental with Tampa Bay. Obviously, everyone knows what happened last year. I don't need to even go into that. To me, if Tampa Bay gets by the first round, that is going to be a huge mental hurdle for them to get over. If they get by the first round, I think it's very, very likely that they could easily go all the way and win the Cup. If they lose again in the first round, it's going to be that mental fragility again, that those demons that they can't seem to get past. I think the first round is going to be massively important for the Tampa Bay Lightning. If they get by and don't choke again, then I think, you know, they're a legit threat to go all the way. So I have Tampa Bay as my strongest Stanley Cup contender, most likely of all the teams to win it, I think. But obviously, there are a lot of other good choices as well. I have a lot of teams in that strong contender category. Quite a few more in the magical run where they definitely have a chance, but it would take something really special for it to happen. And then we have the teams down in the slim chance that I really don't think have much of a shot. And then the virtually no shot teams, I mean, I would be utterly shocked if any of them even made the conference finals. Never mind going to the Stanley Cup or winning the Stanley Cup. If any of them, if honestly, looking at this, Montreal, Florida, Chicago, Minnesota, and Arizona, I would be shocked if any of them even made it past the first round of the playoffs. That'd be shocking to me. So I really don't think those teams have much of a shot. But those are my tiers, guys. It's always fun to talk about. I love doing videos like this, and then obviously we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But if I had to put my list together, that's what it would look like as far as who's most likely to win the Cup, all the way down to teams that are very unlikely to win the Cup this year. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys soon.